I never expected that sitting down to write a simple letter to my grandchildren would force me to confront a secret I've kept buried in my heart for over 60 years. A secret that could either serve as their greatest life lesson or completely shatter the image they have of their perfect grandfather. You see, everyone in this town knows me as Arthur, the honest hardware store owner who never missed a Sunday service and spent 80 years building a reputation for integrity. But the truth is that the very foundation of this life was built on a single, desperate act of survival that I have never dared to breathe a word of until now. As I feel the weight of my years pressing down on me, I have to ask myself, is it better to die with a clean reputation and leave my family with a beautiful lie? Or should I leave behind the messy, painful truth so they can truly understand the cost of a life well lived? I'm going to share everything with you today, from the lessons I've learned about love and loss to the one dark truth I've carried since 1945, and I want you to tell me, was I wrong to keep this from them for so long, or is some honesty too heavy for the next generation to carry? My journey began in a world that looked nothing like the one we live in today, in a small, dusty corner of the Midwest where the horizon felt like a promise and a threat all at once. I was born in 1945, just as the world was trying to heal from the scars of a global war, and my earliest memories are of my father's hands rough, calloused, and smelling of engine oil and tobacco. He was a man who believed that silence was the same thing as strength, and he taught me that a man's word was his bond, a lesson I took to heart perhaps a bit too deeply. My mother was the opposite, a woman of soft songs and hidden anxieties who spent her days trying to stretch a single dollar into a week's worth of meals. We weren't poor in the way people think of today. We were genteel poor, meaning we had a roof over our heads and clean clothes. But there was a constant, low-level hum of desperation that vibrated through the floorboards of our house. I remember sitting at the kitchen table when I was barely 7 years old, watching my parents whisper about a mortgage payment while I pretended to be engrossed in a comic book. That was the first time I learned that the world doesn't care how hard you work. Sometimes the rain just doesn't fall and the bank doesn't wait. As I grew into a young man in the 1960s, the world started to shift. I fell in love with a girl named Martha, your grandmother, whose laugh sounded like wind chimes and whose spirit was far too big for our little town. We were the classic American story, high school sweethearts who married young, full of dreams about a white picket fence and a business of our own. I worked 3 jobs to save up for the down payment on the hardware store, often coming home so tired that I would fall asleep with my boots still on, and Martha was right there beside me, doing the bookkeeping and making sure I ate. We built a life tile by tile, year by year, but there was a moment, early in our marriage, when the pressure almost broke me. We had invested everything into the store, and a larger chain started moving into the next county. Our sales plummeted, and for the first time, I looked at Martha and saw fear in her eyes. I had promised her security, and I was failing. That was when the opportunity presented itself. An old contact from my father's days offered me a way to adjust the books and claim an insurance loss on a shipment that didn't exist. It was the easy way out, the smart business move. I remember standing in the back of the store at midnight, pen in hand, looking at the fraudulent paperwork. I thought about my father's rough hands and his talk about integrity. I tore the papers up. We struggled for 3 more years, eating beans and wearing tattered coats. But when we finally turned a profit, I knew that profit was mine, not the grandchildren to EMB no. Short cuts always lead to a place you don't want to live. But as the decades rolled on, the lessons became more complex. I watched friends lose their lives to greed, and I watched my own children grow up and face their own battles. I learned that forgiveness isn't something you give to others. It's a gift you give yourself so you don't have to carry the weight of someone else's mistakes. I learned that the most important things in life aren't things at all, but the quiet moments, the way the sun hits the porch in the morning, the smell of a new baby's head, the feeling of Martha's hand in mine after 40 years of marriage. However, there was always that one shadow, You see, before I met Martha, when I was just a 19-year-old boy trying to find my way, I made a mistake. A mistake that involved a car, a rainy night, and a decision that changed the trajectory of another family's life forever. I've spent 80 years trying to outrun that night by being the best man in town, hoping that 80 years of good deeds could outweigh 1 minute of cowardice. I've reached the midpoint of my letter now, and the pen is shaking in my hand. I'm about to write down the name of the man I hit that night, the man who never got to grow old like I did because I was too scared to stop. So that's the situation I'm in. I'm an 80-year-old man who is adored by his grandchildren, respected by his neighbors, and loved by a wife who thinks I'm a saint. If I finish this letter and tell them the truth, I might lose their respect, but I will finally be honest. If I burn this letter, I take the secret to my grave, and they continue to live with a grandfather who is a hero in their eyes. Before I tell you what I chose to do, whether I sealed that envelope or threw it into the fireplace, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you let your grandchildren keep their hero, or would you give them the truth even if it's ugly? I looked at the photos of my grandchildren on the mantel, Liam, with his bright eyes and his dream of becoming a lawyer, and Sarah, who has her grandmother's fierce heart. I realized that if I want them to be truly great people, they need to know that even the people they love are capable of terrible things. They need to know that being a good man isn't about never making a mistake. It's about what you do with the guilt afterward. I finished the letter. I wrote about the rainy night in 1964, about the thump I felt against the bumper, and about how I kept driving because I was terrified of losing my scholarship and my future. I wrote about how I went back the next day and saw the flowers on the side of the road, and how I've spent every day since then trying to earn the life I stole. I didn't ask for their forgiveness in the letter because I don't think I deserve it. I just asked them to learn from my cowardice. I sealed the envelope and placed it in my safety deposit box with instructions to open it only after I'm gone. The aftermath of writing that letter was a strange, hollow peace. I didn't tell Martha. She's gone now, and I'd like to believe she knows the truth in whatever comes next. But I've changed the way I talk to my grandkids. Now, when I tell them stories, I don't just tell them about the successes. I tell them about the times I was weak. I tell them that life is a series of tiles, and sometimes the tiles are cracked and stained, but they still make up the floor you walk on. I've spent my final months making sure they understand that integrity isn't a destination. It's a constant, daily choice. The consequences of my confession will only be felt after I'm dead, and perhaps that's my final act of cowardice, not being there to see the disappointment in their eyes. But I have to believe that the truth is the most valuable inheritance I can leave them, far more important than the store or the house. In the end, 80 years of life has taught me that the only thing you can truly take with you is the knowledge that you stopped running. My grandchildren will eventually read that letter, and they will know that their grandfather was a flawed, scared man who tried his best to make up for a terrible moment. I hope they see that as a lesson in humanity, rather than a reason to hate me. If you believe that the truth, no matter how late it comes, is the right choice for a family's legacy, please like this video. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to admit, even to a piece of paper. Subscribe to Family Tiles Chronicle for more stories about the complicated reality of family history and the lessons we learned too late. Share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Should I have kept my secret to protect their peace? Or is the truth always worth the pain? I'll see you all in the next story.